How was that the call? After 15 minutes of deliberating, that's what you call? 3 texts and a flagrant 1? That's it? That's it? That is what they called.
An eye swipe, a shove, and then a full-on body slam. In a matter of seconds, Caitlin Clark went from star player to target, thrown to the ground by an opponent. But the most shocking part wasn't the attack itself. It was what the referees did next. They punished her. This wasn't just a bad call in a heated game. It was the moment a bitter rivalry exploded into on-court chaos, exposing a dangerous crisis the WNBA can no longer hide. What followed revealed a pattern of targeting so blatant that players were forced to take matters into their own hands.
Clark,
there's a
hustle it
lot.
away.
I mean, is that displacement? I think it is.
Oh, and Marina Mabry's going to get ejected.
The tension didn't start with the opening whistle. It had been brewing for years, born from a fierce college rivalry between Caitlin Clark and JC Sheldon. Back when Clark was leading Iowa and Sheldon was the star for Ohio State, they faced off repeatedly. But it wasn't a balanced rivalry. Clark's record against her was a perfect 12-0. That kind of history doesn't just disappear when players turn pro. It follows them, simmering under the surface, waiting for a spark. And that spark came when Sheldon reached in on Clark during the game.
Can see here, JC Sheldon is guarding Caitlin Clark. She swipes her in the eyeball. Caitlin Clark nudges her off because JC stays in her face. And then Tina Charles runs over and is kind of wagging her finger in Caitlin Clark's face. And then Marina Mabry comes out of nowhere and chucks her to the floor.
Her hand didn't just go for the ball, it swiped directly across Clark's eye, a move that sent a shockwave through the arena. Clark instantly recoiled, her hand shooting up to her face. For a moment, the game hung in the balance, but the referees called it a common foul, a simple slap on the wrist for an act that was clearly more than incidental contact. That single decision set a dangerous precedent for the rest of the night. It sent a message to every player on the court. The normal rules didn't seem to apply, and a certain level of aggression was going to be tolerated. The eye poke was just the opening act.
Caitlin's gonna have to start wearing goggles. And then Caitlin pushes her off of her, like, why are you still in my face? Marina Mabry, bat out of hell, chucks Caitlin Clark to the ground.
Before anyone could even process the eye poke, the situation exploded. As Clark nudged Sheldon away, who remained in her face long after the foul, another player came charging in. Marina Mabry saw the confrontation from a distance and sprinted toward the action like a heat-seeking missile. This wasn't a basketball play, it was a blatant, calculated attack. Mabry lowered her shoulder and body slammed Clark, the league's 120-pound phenom, sending her sprawling to the hardwood.
Because that's a lot of contact going on right there. That's a lot of unnecessary contact. That's a lot of non-basketball contact.
The game immediately ground to a halt as players from both teams rushed in. Fingers were pointed, words were exchanged, and the atmosphere shifted from competitive to hostile. It was the kind of flagrant act that should have resulted in an immediate ejection. A clear line had been crossed. With the game on the brink of an all-out brawl, everyone turned to the officials, expecting them to restore order and make a decisive statement. But what they did next would only pour more gasoline on the fire.
During this play, right? So the 3 referees that I like to say, they got them straight out of Sephora, because I don't think these referees have ever refereed a professional basketball game in their life. They took these referees, they were at the monitor, they looked at it for, I'm not even exaggerating, you guys, like 15 minutes. 15 minutes they are watching this play over and over.
What followed was an agonizing 15-minute review. For 15 long minutes, the entire world watched the same replays over and over. The evidence seemed undeniable. The eye swipe was reckless. The shove from Mabry was intentional, dangerous, and had absolutely nothing to do with the game of basketball. The announcers on the broadcast were already predicting the obvious outcome, a flagrant foul on Sheldon and a clear ejection for Mabry. But after a bizarrely long deliberation, the final verdict left everyone speechless.
And mind you, the reporters at the time, the announcers here are saying, of course, Marina Mabry is going to get ejected because that was unwarranted. She literally came out of nowhere and chucked Caitlin Clark. There should be a flagrant 1, of course, on JC Sheldon because she swiped her and hit her in the eyeball. Whether it is intentional,
JC Sheldon received a flagrant 1 foul for the eye swipe. Marina Mabry received just a technical foul. And in a decision that defied all logic, Caitlin Clark, the player who was swiped in the eye and then thrown to the ground, also received a technical foul. foul. Mabry, the one who committed the most egregious act, was allowed to stay in the game. The message sent by the officials was now crystal clear and deeply disturbing. You could physically assault the league's biggest star, and the consequences would be the same as her simply defending herself.
Funny because on the broadcast, I'm not even sure who the male announcer was, but he was essentially like, what do you actually need to do to get ejected? Because Marina just came out of nowhere and chucked her to the ground and was not ejected for that. So what do you actually need to do to be ejected from the game in a WNBA game?
This baffling incident wasn't an isolated event. It was the boiling point of a problem that has been plaguing Caitlin Clark all season long. From the moment she stepped into the WNBA, it's felt like there's been a target on her back. She's been subjected to cheap shots, blindside hits, and aggressive fouls that go far beyond the typical welcome to the league physicality that rookies endure. It has forced fans and analysts to ask a very uncomfortable question. Would this ever happen to an NBA superstar? Imagine for a second if a player blindsided LeBron James or Steph Curry, throwing them to the floor after poking them in the eye.
The other night, Dejanay Carrington yanked Sarah Ashley Barker's hair, and it was a common foul. There was no flagrants. We have seen those, and now we have seen a non-basketball play getting shoved to the ground, and it's just a technical foul. Nobody gets ejected.
The game would stop, ejections would be swift, and suspensions would surely follow. There would be no debate. Yet for Clark, it seems to be open season, and the league's inaction has felt like a silent endorsement of the aggression. The referees aren't just missing calls, they are creating a dangerous environment where players feel they can get away with anything. This isn't just about one game anymore, it's a pattern of targeting that the league seems unwilling or unable to address.
Caitlin Clark and JC Sheldon, of all people, I feel like this is the rivalry. These are two players who do not seem to like one another at all. And this goes all the way back to college. And when Iowa was going up against Ohio State, Caitlin Clark is 12-0 against JC Sheldon.
As the game continued with the officials refusing to take control, someone else decided to. Clark's teammate Sophie Cunningham had seen enough. The message had been sent that aggression was permissible, and Cunningham decided to speak the only language the game seemed to understand that night. As JC Sheldon, the player who started the whole sequence, drove to the basket for a layup, Cunningham didn't just contest the shot, she wrapped her up in a powerful bear hug and took her to the ground.
Sophie commits a hard foul on JC Sheldon. Again, as JC Sheldon is going up for a layup, Sophie bear hugs her and takes her to the ground. What I will say is Sophie did not grab her and throw her to the ground. She didn't body slam her.
It was a hard foul without a doubt, and it was absolutely intentional, but it wasn't designed to injure. It was a clear, undeniable message. Cunningham had become the enforcer, the teammate drawing a line in the sand that the referees had failed to draw themselves. It was a raw, controversial act, but it was a direct and powerful response to the chaos the officials had allowed to fester all night. In that moment, she decided that if the league wouldn't protect her teammate, she would.
Sheldon goes coast to coast. And here we got another breakers here as JC Sheldon goes right after Sophie Cunningham.
That's a flagrant foul. It's a hard foul. You could say it's a play on the ball, but
The crowd's reaction told the whole story. The moment Sheldon hit the floor, the arena didn't gasp in shock, it erupted in cheers. Chants of "Sophie, Sophie, Sophie" echoed through the entire building. The fans weren't cheering for a dirty play, they were cheering for retribution. They were celebrating the fact that someone finally was standing up for Caitlin Clark. It was a powerful display of shared frustration, a collective roar from thousands of people who had watched the league's brightest light get targeted all night with no protection from the officials.
Their second job is to make sure that there is a good product of basketball on the court, that the referees aren't getting in the way of the product that is on the floor. And with that, you guys, you can hear it in the video right here. The Indiana Fever fans were chanting, "Sophie, Sophie."
That That chant was a verdict on the officiating, a sign that the fans in the stands understood what was happening far better than the people in charge of the game. They knew this wasn't just about a hard foul, it was about loyalty, protection, and a rebellion against a system that was so clearly failing its players. The cheer was for the one person who finally did something about it.
On this, she bear hugged her, took her to the ground. Yes, it was intentional. It was absolutely intentional. It was, to me, payback for what was happening the entire game. But she did it in a way that she wasn't going to injure JC. She was just making it known, like, if the refs aren't going to handle it, I will handle it. We'll take care of it, but this is not what you're going to do when you come into our house.
All right, enough is enough. You know, at some point, the line gets crossed too often where something needs to be done and things need to be corrected. And that is certainly the case with the way things around Caitlin Clark are officiated.
After the game, Fever coach Stephanie White didn't hold back. She said what everyone was thinking. When the officials don't get control of the ball game, this is what happens. Her frustration highlighted the real problem. This wasn't about players being too aggressive. It was about an institutional failure to enforce the rules. In the days that followed, the league's response was a deafening silence. There were no public statements, no apologies, and no supplemental discipline for Mabry.
Off. It turns into something that we normally see in the NBA, but I do not blame Sophie at all. Like, I have her back. I have her back in this moment, and I'm sorry, I'm not for intentional fouls. I am not one to advocate for dirty plays. To me, this was not a dirty play. This was making a statement because the referees didn't do their damn job.
This is a constant problem now. You know, it is something that since the beginning, I've kind of like backed off on, because physical play is a part of sports. You know, going after a superstar and trying to rough them up a little bit to get in their head is a part of sports. But when it crosses the line, the referees need to do their jobs.
This inaction was a statement in itself, confirming the double standard that fans had been pointing out for weeks. The WNBA wants the primetime TV slots and sold-out arenas that come with a star like Clark, but it seems unwilling to provide the same level of protection that male superstars in other leagues take for granted. This isn't just a PR nightmare. It raises serious questions about whether the league is truly ready for the spotlight it so desperately craves.
What happens, right? This is what happens. You've got competitive women who are the best in the world at what they do, right? And when you allow them to play physical and you allow these things to happen, they're going to compete and they're going to have their teammates' backs. It's exactly what you expect, right? Out of fierce competitions.
They need to do their jobs, blow the whistle, and officiate properly. Hand out flagrants, kick people out of games, nip it in the bud. But continuously, over and over again now, we see Caitlin Clark on the receiving end of something, and it's not called correctly.
With the league failing to act, a dangerous unwritten code has begun to take over. Sophie Cunningham's takedown wasn't just a moment of frustration, it was a form of player police justice. When referees refuse to do their jobs, the players are left to create their own system of checks and balances.
And it made me think if this was LeBron in the NBA, think if this was Steph Curry in the NBA, do you really think that the NBA would be allowing certain players in the NBA to go after LeBron the way that Caitlin was chucked to the ground? Do you think if another player came up, blindsided LeBron, chucked him to the ground after he had just been poked in the eye, that the NBA would be like, oh yeah, technicals, nobody's ejected, just a common technical foul? That would never it would never happen.
In fact, she gets a technical foul after getting poked in the eye and then shoved to the floor, and Marina Mabry doesn't even get thrown out of the game. It's basically open season on Caitlin Clark, and the special whistle that she supposedly gets goes in the other direction. Flagrantly so.
This system isn't based on rules, but on intimidation and retaliation, and it's a terrifying precedent to set. It tells every other team in the league that the only way to protect your star is to have an enforcer ready to take someone out. It encourages escalation and pushes the sport into dangerous territory where a player's career could be ended by a single retaliatory act. While fans cheered for Cunningham, her action was a symptom of a deeply broken system, a system where the only justice available is the kind you take with your own hands.
And what we saw in this Connecticut Sun game was JC Sheldon picking Caitlin Clark up full court. It was back to rookie year defensive strategies against Caitlin Clark, guarding her full court, face guarding her, blitzing her on every single screen, double teaming her. Like, that was the Connecticut Sun defensive strategy for Caitlin Clark, and JC Sheldon was in her face the entire time.
Well, And again, there's a certain level, like in the first half, it was fine. Sheldon and her, a little shove, Mabry, a little shove, that's fine. But when she's getting poked in the eye, knocked to the floor, and people aren't getting ejected and she's getting a technical foul too, there's a problem.
The game eventually ended, with the Indiana Fever pulling out a win, but the real questions were just beginning. This single, chaotic game exposed a deep and troubling issue within the WNBA. The league is experiencing a golden age of growth, an explosion in popularity fueled almost single-handedly by Caitlin Clark's arrival. She is, by every measure, its most valuable asset, yet she is getting the opposite of superstar treatment on the court. The league is now at a critical crossroads.
I so wish that Coach Stephanie White would have gotten a technical in that situation. I wish she would have gotten those referees' faces and lit them up. Take a technical. At this point in time, you know that you can't get ejected because we saw a shove to the ground on a non-basketball play and she didn't get ejected for that.
And Sophie Cunningham gets thrown out later. I forget everybody who got thrown out of this damn game. Sophie Cunningham gets thrown out. She's playing the enforcer role for the Fever, which they desperately needed. So good for her for stepping up in that moment. That spicy Sophie Cunningham.
It can continue to allow its officials to let games spiral out of control, risking the health and safety of its main attraction, or it can step up and implement real changes to protect its players. The fuse has been lit. Does a player have to be carried off the court on a stretcher before real action is taken? Everyone is now watching to see if the WNBA will put out the fire or if it will simply wait for the inevitable explosion.